For every man, woman, and child alive, there is something out there that spooks them. You interact with something and post-haste are afflicted with night terrors, sleep paralysis, and a stress disorder. If you're a geek, you call this horror, but if you're smart, you also call it horror, because that's what it's called. However, many a soul find themselves in an unfortunate predicament. Most horror, for most people, is a load of phooey. Goofs these days pilfer out a cheap scare so they can point at you and laugh in your face for being so stupid and so gullible to believe what you were about to witness could possibly be well made, and then they leave your house after disorganizing your underwear drawer, successfully wasting your time, and probably your money as well. The horror I've come across in the last year have been pretty much entirely underwear drawer fiends, and that makes me sad on the inside. But worry not. If you're one of those people who thinks you're getting duped by big horror to buy more slop as well, boy golly do I have the solution for you. There's a chance you've maybe heard of this place I'm going to talk about. It's this niche, underground, never before seen little place called the SCP Foundation. Whoop-de-doo. In case you live under a stone, what the SCP Foundation actually isn't really that important, but just so we're all on the same page, it is a collaborative writing project centering a paramilitary organization dedicated to containing anomalies. I'm certain you've heard of the site's smash hit zingers before, like the Tickle Monster, the Hard-to-Kill Reptile, the Shy Guy, the Plague Doctor, or the ever-famous sculpture that set off the first domino back in the alleys of 2007 4chan. Most people only know those guys, maybe a couple stray ones covered by slop centers like SCP Explained. And I can't really blame you, because you'd have to read to go beyond that. But today, I want to focus up on the scary stuff that gets buried in all the jargon and slice-of-life fanfiction. There's a ton of gems in the Foundation if you know where to look, and that's what I hope to prove to you today. With no further introduction, let's get crack-a-lacking. Abwesenheit, by the Great Hippo, is a tale from the Parawatch forum. Parawatch is basically in-universe 4chan for tinfoil hatters and believers in the supernatural, in case you're curious. But all that really means is that it reads more like a creepypasta than an SCP article, like the rest of these might. Of course, it's still on the Foundation wiki, so I figured I should include it. Abwesenheit opens by introducing us to the reclusive film director Joseph Helmuth, who is described as incredibly niche for lack of a better term. The post says Helmuth didn't want his films to be known, that only one ever contained credits, and those credits only thank his vague benefactors, whatever that means. All the sources for his films are exceedingly difficult to find in the modern day, most of their copies being destroyed in a warehouse fire. His film style is described as containing long, continuous shots with no dialogue and themes of isolation. The post describes his first film, Nichts. Released in 1951, it features 2 hours of continuous footage from the perspective of an unseen person exploring an abandoned munitions factory. In this film, the cameraman enters the factory from the outside, descends many flights of stairs, and then explores the basement area. The basement is impossible, structurally, possessing more levels than it should and containing many unexplained machines without purpose. The camera zooms in on several items that are out of place throughout the exploration, most notably including a wooden dreidel on the ground. The rest of the film includes a silhouette, only briefly visible, and ends with a 15-minute exploration of a pitch-black room with only the sound of breathing indicating change. The post then describes Helmuth's fifth film, Doppelganger, made in 1953. In this film, the cameraman flees from an unknown figure inside a maze of mirrors like you might see in a carnival. The figure can only be seen hazily in the reflection of the mirrors, but this is where the weirdness sets in. Firstly, the camera is not seen in any of the mirrors, and secondly, as fans of the film mapped the movement of the camera, they realize that the cameraman frequently moves through one of the mirrors. The next film mentioned in the post is Schuld, made in 1954. It contains a 3-hour fixed shot of 4 figures burning on a pyre with a crowd watching. Details about its filming and background are murky, and most viewers reported stress, anxiety, and illness upon viewing. The next piece of the post mentions Helmuth's stance on his position as a director, in which he describes in a letter that death of the author, where the author's influence is not present, is even too much of the author, and that art may only be observation of natural process. As he says, To say the author is dead, you must first presume the author was once alive. But the author was never alive. The author was never even there. Once this letter was discovered, it was written on in many publications, prompting Helmuth to go radio silent and practically go missing. That is, until 1961, when he released his final film, Abwesenheit. The complete final film was lost to time, but in the home of a prominent fan and art collector, a portion of the film was found in a recorded viewing from the perspective of the collector. The footage is incredibly distorted, and what's playing is sometimes unclear, but the audience is always in panic. They sob behind the camera throughout the movie, and as the film starts to conclude, the collector begs for the film to end. The recording ends suddenly as a hand covers the lens. The article ends with the disappearance of the collector under unclear circumstances, noting one last time that the recorded viewing of the film was also recorded in a particular film type that was Helmuth's go-to. The post ends there. Now, despite being incredibly creepy already, the point of all this might not be immediately clear if you aren't in the know. In a discussion thread post, the Great Hippo, the author of the article, explains, 1950s Germany was facing what was called the Kollektivschuld, or collective guilt after the outcome of the Holocaust. Nichts, meaning nothing, explores an abandoned munitions factory after World War II, also introducing us to the dreidel, representing the Jewish people. The reflection in Doppelganger represents this side of Helmuth, the one that would let this happen, so to speak. Schuld, meaning guilt, represents Helmuth's burning guilt and revulsion, but to understand Abwesenheit, you need to understand the background of this, too. You see, as the author says, there's a whole branch of Jewish theology that asks whether God died in the Holocaust. Helmuth posits that after the Holocaust, God must either not exist or be malevolent, and his choice is Abwesenheit, meaning absence. SCP-7179, titled E is for Eternity, written by Calibold, was made for the 2022 Halloween anthology event, The ABCs of Death, which includes a spooky article for each letter of the alphabet. The event coordinator chose a different article as the scariest article, but that one was a load of baloney, and if I was in charge, I would have picked this one. SCP-7179 is an extra-dimensional space that each and every person that has died has ended up, like an afterlife. Every person gets their own dimensional space. Each one includes an island, surrounding waters with infinitely looping barriers, and a stagnant sun in the dead center of the sky, like God intended. On the coast of the island itself is a house with 3 people of each deceased person's preferred sex that have no free will of their own and are pretty much dolls to the deceased. The island also includes flora that imitate drugs like alcohol and meth, and there's a bunch of animals too. To summarize, you can't die here, you can't leave, and nothing new happens. The rest of the article follows Paul Hiddleston, a recently deceased 34-year-old man who dies shortly after the Foundation affixes his brain with a construct that lets them observe the afterlife. Upon arriving, Paul is greeted by the 3 women on his island. He takes in his surroundings and after becoming accustomed, capitalizes on his circumstances and does exactly what you would expect him to do. He drinks, uses the drug plants, and engages in the devil's game of hopscotch with the 3 women on the island. This is pretty much all he does for the first 2 years. Over the next few years, he starts to neglect himself, not eating or doing much of anything for a while. 6 years in, suddenly, he tries to escape, making a raft out of trees and reaching the looping walls, which put him on the other side of the space when he reaches them. He quickly realizes that it's getting him nowhere, and he takes up cooking to occupy his mind. By the 18-year mark, he's become a master chef. He tries to crossbreed the plants on his island to entertain himself. After 81 years, Paul decides to try building things. And after 101 years, he builds his first house. By 416 years, he's become an architect, with nothing but wood and other island materials. Across the centuries, he tears down some buildings and replaces them to make different structures in their place. After 2009 years, Paul starts to consider if his life here might really be endless. His symptoms of depression and anxiety worsen, but he tries to keep himself occupied. After 5,478 years, he tears down his entire village with his bare hands over the course of a few months, before rebuilding. After 11,902 years, he brutalizes all 3 women on the island and tears them apart, followed by immense guilt and stress as he tries to drown himself. It doesn't work, and by 19,600 years, all 3 women have fully reassembled. 124,000 years in, He builds a giant structure to crush him and hopefully kill him. After 900,000 years, he's fully reassembled. And while this was unbearably painful, it was something, and so he does it again, in several different fashions. By 5.8 million years, he burns himself to ashes. By 16 million years, his body fully regenerates. He does many similar things, but grows more and more numb to the pain each time. By 1.2 billion years, he's become completely irrational as the millennia pass. After 1 trillion years, he stops moving completely, since nothing can stimulate him anymore. He never does anything ever again. After 5 to the 28th power factorial years, which is impossible to express in standard notation, all possible permutations of particles within the space have been reached, theoretically. The article ends at the 10 to the 100th power factorial, or 1 Google factorial, years, stating 1 second of eternity has passed. This last article is SCP-6370, or Hungering in full caps by Disadron. SCP-6370 is another extra-dimensional space, but the entryway for how to get into this place is unclear. The space has pretty much nothing in it except for a barren desert, sparse buildings, and a highway running down the expanse, with one entity that's thought to be native here. Everything else in the article follows Foundation researcher Jeffrey Brandez's body cam after he gets transported into the space while driving home. The footage begins with Brandez clocking out from his shift at the Foundation and starting to drive home after exchanging some friendly, catchy on the flip side, with another researcher. Then, about 21 minutes in, there's some static, and Brandez enters SCP-6370. After a bit, he spots a diner on the side of the road and pulls over into the parking lot because he's feeling hungry. He looks around, tries to make a few calls that don't go anywhere, and seemingly understands that something is wrong. He spots an old man walking down the road, barefoot, feet bleeding. Brandez tries to ask where they are and how to get out, but the old man just says he's gotta keep moving. He looks over Brandez's shoulder and panics before running away again. Brandez watches him before he walks into the diner. The diner is empty and disheveled, everything super old and clearly outdated. A woman out of sight says she'll be with him momentarily, and to take a seat, which he does. Another patron is visible now, a large bald man facing away from him. Brandez takes out his phone before the server comes out and asks him about his day, to which he looks up from his phone and stares at her, her name tag unreadable from degradation. He asks if she's okay, which she affirms. Then a loud snorting sound erupts. He asks if they know each other, which she denies, as another snorting sound comes from the patron in the back, who's forcing food into his mouth so fast it's impeding his ability to breathe. The server asks if Brandez wants coffee, sounding distressed, and Brandez says yes. A loud crunching noise comes from the patron, who looks over his shoulder, his eyes covered with sunglasses. He resumes quickly. The server asks what brings him here. Brandez says he's trying to get home, and the server says, "Aren't we all?" The chewing gets louder as Brandez attempts to order several things, but the server says they're out of everything he lists. By the end of the list, the chewing in the background is so loud they can't hear each other speak. Eventually it reaches the point where the server's ears start bleeding as she says one unintelligible syllable. Brandez runs out of the diner, sees his car is gone, and decides with no hesitation to start walking. The chewing sounds stop as he leaves, and when he turns to look at the diner, the server is crying in the window, looking back at him. After 43 minutes of walking, Brandez spots a young man going down the road the other way, towards him. He runs to the young man and asks where they are, which is responded to with hostility, before he offers Brandez the advice to just keep moving. He says, "The ogre, don't let the ogre catch you." After an hour and 12 minutes of walking, a building is seen in the distance, and after another 19 minutes, Brandez reaches it. The building has no windows and holds a parking lot in front of it. When he reaches the building, the automatic doors open and the lights come on. It's a supermarket, with no items on the shelves except for empty boxes and packets. After some wandering, a box falls behind him suddenly. He peers around the tall shelves and spots a door on the far wall, shutting loudly. When he gets to it, it's locked. He continues to search the building for another 34 minutes before finally seeing a customer service desk with another woman behind it. She greets him and informs him that they're out of pretty much everything they have, like he doesn't have working eyes. He asks for a way out of this place, a way home, but she says there's no escape. There's no going home. Then a sound plays over the PA system, followed by more loud chewing, like from the diner. The woman says he has to leave now because the store is closing. Brandes argues and asks how we can get out of here, before a figure shuffles behind the woman, which now we can see is the patron from the diner as well. This is the ogre, no doubt. Bald, with uneven gray skin, with a fake nose drawn on its flat face. Despite this, it starts making sniffing noises before opening its mouth, and a long, ulcered tongue flops out onto her shoulder. Then, it bites down on her trap muscle. The woman tells Brandes to run, just before the ogre rips her trap muscles out, spraying blood everywhere. She repeats her command, and Brandes breaks into a run finally. He runs through aisles for 16 minutes before getting to the doors, and he flees the building and hits the highway again. The sky's blood red. Brandes runs. He runs for almost 4.5 hours straight before he decides to look over his shoulder. The ogre is in the distance still, standing in the middle of the road. 7 hours later, Brandes stops to vomit after running for so long, but keeps moving right after. A whole 16 hours of running later, Brandes sees a building and reaches it, before giving up and sitting down next to the door. He finally notices the body cam is on and points it up at himself. He's still covered in the customer service woman's blood. He tries to make out a sentence about his findings, how his cognition is hazy, and how time and distance both seem wrong. Then, the door opens behind him. The ogre sees him and grabs him, its sunglasses falling off and revealing its eyes to be tiny black specks in a mass of gray folds. It sniffs Brandes, dripping pus onto him from its neck, before opening its giant mouth with its square teeth described as too big for its own mouth. The ogre bites down on Brandes' hand, and he screeches. 2.5 of his fingers are gone. The ogre starts to chew on them, as it makes a noise directed behind it. The server lady comes into frame. Brandes begs her for help, with no response. Brandes props himself on the floor, bleeding gratuitously from where his fingers used to be, while the server drags out a meat grinder. The ogre stops Brandes from moving, while the server cries quietly. It repositions itself before pulling on Brandes' leg, ripping it, tearing it, and finally popping his femur out of its socket. The ogre takes the leg and moves its tongue into the center of the bone to extract the marrow. It does this again and again, one of the ulcers on its tongue popping and spraying fluid everywhere. Once all the marrow is gone, it discards the rest of the leg and walks out of frame as the server comes back, holding a knife. She picks up the leg and slices chunks of its meat into the meat grinder, turning the crank and pushing the minced flesh out onto a plate. As she does this, a new customer walks through the door, and the server calls out that she'll be with them shortly as she picks up the plate and wipes her eyes. The log ends with the server greeting the new customer as the footage transmission fails. Yeah, some freaky deaky stuff indeed, dear viewer. No doubt you're quaking in your boots as we speak. If your socks are still on your feet right now, you might just be more of a man than me. Hopefully this banger convinced you to read more SCP articles, because I'm not really sure where else you can find this volume of good horror, especially when it comes to written horror. And they're all pretty short and sweet too, in case you need those jingling keys in front of you, especially Abwesenheit and other Parawatch articles. They're like 5-minute reads. If you don't want to read more, then you're gonna have to be okay with missing out. That's all I got today. Appreciate you sticking around. Stay woke, little jit.